Financial aid scheme NSFAS is gearing itself up to help close to 500,000 needy students in the country's tertiary institutions. The good news is that its budget has also been increased from 9 to 9.5 billion rand from the previous year. The scheme has always faced criticism from student bodies, which argue that its budget is not enough to meet the needs of underprivileged students across the country. Msulwa Daqqa is the executive officer of the scheme. We invited him earlier to talk about the challenges the scheme is facing. We started off by asking him how the budget for the year looked like and what they intended to achieve.
This year, when we have done all our final tallies, we expect to have 9.5 billion rands, which is an increase from the previous year. We still expect to assist about 430,000 students, numbers roughly 230,000 at the TVET colleges and about 200,000 at universities across the country.
The 9 billion to the 9.5 comparatively, there were complaints the previous year that 9 billion was insufficient. Is just an increase of 0.5 billion enough as far as you're concerned?
That's what the fiscus and the state can afford, is an additional 500 million into the system. But there is focus to ensure that we get efficiencies out of what we already have. 9.5 billion by any measure is a lot of money, and we think that it should go a long way in assisting a lot of students. And the government has increased its contribution to the scheme. Just as an example, in 2009, this scheme was funded by government for about 3.1 billion, and that has now increased in a space of about 5-6 years to 9.5 billion, and that's a significant increase in funding. And it also means that an increased number of students is also going to be assisted by the state this year. There may still be students that are not funded, but there's also other schemes that are state schemes that may assist those students. For instance, you'll find that the Department of Health also has got a bursary program for students in the health sciences fraternity, and there's various other schemes that are available to make sure that a bigger number of students, not just NSFAS, are assisted.
There are suggestions that NSFAS should, among others, include the private work on private partnerships. Have you looked at that avenue?
We have looked at that avenue. I think the realization is there is not too much money that is idle in the private sector. Some of the private sector entities are already funding bursaries, and therefore when we talk to them, they say to us, look, we're already spending so much money giving that money as bursaries. And as NSFAS, we're not necessarily wanting to duplicate what they do. If they are funding students, we are happy with that because those students also reduce the demand from the side of NSFAS. We are, however, talking all the time with the various foundations in the private sector to see if we can get more money. From a government perspective, we've done pretty well in the last few years. We now got a number of sitters running their bursary programs through NSFAS. We also get money from various other government departments, social development, agriculture, forest and fisheries. Basic education is one of the biggest contributors, and there's other government departments like the military veterans fund is also administered by NSFAS. Therefore, from government departments, we are making substantial progress in getting new money, but also in consolidating the existing bursary funds from government.
And how do you cater for disabled pupils who want to further their studies through tertiary institutions?
Firstly, students with disabilities can be funded under the scheme broadly. They can apply like anyone else. If a student with a disability is doing education, they can apply for funding that is offered to teachers. But also as a top-up and as an aside, we also set aside about 70 million rands just to fund students with disabilities. That is to make sure that if we miss them in the bigger funding category, we don't miss them in the specific funding category.